I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'd like to talk about some specific charts and some very interesting findings that I have found analyzing charts of people who have drowned and who have drowned in very similar ways. I thought you might find this very, very interesting. Since I did the chart of Natalie Wood as well as Sridevi, who both were apparently died through drowning, I found someone else's chart that is remarkably like Sridevi's chart. And not only that, they also drowned in a bathtub, supposedly, and that is Whitney Houston. I gotta share with you, I pulled up her chart just to see if there was any planet Skandanta or what's going on in her chart, and I thought it was the same chart. I thought I made a mistake, because looking at the charts, you're gonna find that they are so similar. Now, let me explain something. First, let me go over Whitney's chart information. She was born August 9th, 1963 at 8:55 p.m. in Newark, New Jersey. And Sridevi was born 4 days different. Whitney Houston is actually born 4 days earlier. And that's why the charts are so similar. So Sridevi was born August 13th, 1963, 5:30 a.m. in Madras, India. And Sridevi, who we've gone over extensively in a previous YouTube, has a Cancer ascendant. But let's talk a minute about Whitney Houston, because she has a different ascendant. Of course, her chart, all the planets are pretty much the same except for the moon. The moon is what shifts in the period of the 4 days earlier. So Whitney Houston, her ascendant is Aquarius. So it is at 15 degrees of Aquarius. And with that, notice the Jupiter moon going to the second house. And the second house is the voice. And Jupiter, being in its own sign, being in Pisces, is extraordinarily strong. So the second house has the ruler of the second in the second with the moon. Now, of course, we know of the second house as being a Marka house. Usually around the time of death, there's problems with the Markas. But we're not going to go so much into the predictive stuff as to what caused her death. We're mainly going to go into the similarities of these charts that you can see that they're going to have a similar demise in accordance to problems with water. So Whitney Houston, her voice, she was a magnificent singer. I mean, one of the most beautiful voices. And that is portrayed here by the second house, which deals with the voice. Also, of course, it's a house of money and very wealthy due to her beautiful voice. But her chart is a little bit more difficult. Now, both had problems, major problems in their lives. But notice that in Whitney Houston's chart, she has Saturn going to the 12th house. So she has Saturn, ruler of the 12th, in the 12th. And with Sridevi, her Saturn's in the 7th house, ruler of the 7th in the 7th. Of course, both in Capricorn. The same degree, of course, 26 degrees of Capricorn. And Sridevi's issue and problems was around relationships, whereas Whitney Houston struggled with things behind the scenes. So she had a lot of secrets, things that were hidden. And also, when you look at Jupiter with the moon, this is a great combination. It's a Gajacasari Yoga that she has Jupiter moon. Her moon is in Pisces instead of Sridevi's is in Taurus. But both are soft and both produce beauty. Moon Pisces, moon in Taurus. But it is interesting how these similarities do tie up, particularly if you'll go to, of course, they're going to have Rahu and Ketu at the same degree. Rahu is 26 degrees of Gemini in both charts, and Ketu is 26 degrees of Sagittarius. And for Whitney, now Rahu is in the 5th house, and the 5th house is children. And as you well know, her daughter died in 2015 in the same manner, which is unbelievable that her daughter also had an event where she was in a bathtub. Now, she lost consciousness and she went into a coma where she eventually died from the same thing happening. How unbelievably is that? But Rahu in the 5th is problems with children. So she had problems with her daughter, which Bobby Brown was her name, and this was really, really a tragedy, and so many tragedies stemmed looking at this. Now, notice that for Whitney Houston, she has her Sun and her Venus in the 6th house in Cancer. And what I find to be relative, I'm going to show you a couple of more drownings, not that I want to dwell on this, but it's so interesting that what goes across the board in all 4 of these charts I'm going to show you is the sign Cancer. So Whitney Houston's Sun is at 23 degrees of Cancer, while Sridevi's is at 26 degrees of Cancer. And both of them have Venus combust the Sun, which when Venus is in the same sign as the Sun, it is combust. But as long as it's not the same degree as the Sun, that's something else entirely called Cassini, but we're not going to go into that. So Venus combust the Sun usually can give relationship problems, because what that means is Venus, which is the indicator of relationships, is burnt, it's harmed. So both of them have had their fair share problems around relationships. But with Whitney, with these planets in the 6th house, she struggled. She struggled so much with her health and trying to stay away from destructive things such as drugs, alcohol, all these things that she kept trying to get away from these problems. But notice that her Mars is in the 8th house. That is such a damaging house for Mars to be in. There was all sorts of deep psychological problems that she was trying to overcome. But most of all, I want to say that with so many planets in water signs, Jupiter moon in Pisces, Jupiter is at 26 degrees, and I might make note that both of them have Jupiter at 26 degrees and Saturn at 26 degrees, with Saturn's full aspect onto Jupiter, its 3rd full aspect. So Saturn is fully aspecting Jupiter in both charts, which can cause some setbacks and problems. Once again, for when there's planets in the 2nd house, such as with Whitney, she has the ruler of the 6th in the 2nd. She struggled with the things she consumed. The 2nd house is not only the voice, but it's the mouth. So it's what goes into our mouth as well as what comes out of our mouth. So what we consume, that's the 2nd house. And with Jupiter being ruler of the moon, being ruler of the 6th, she had problems with what she ingested. This can be poison, it could be toxic. But to make a long story short, they both have all these water signs, which is Pisces and Cancer. And I want to add a few more charts here that are significant, because when we talk about planets that are Gandanta, we're usually talking about the very last degree, 2 degrees of water, or the 1st degree of fire. Now, you could say that the 26 degrees Jupiter is on the fringe of this, or you could say that the sun is close to being Gandanta, particularly in Sridevi's chart. But let me show a couple of more charts that will exemplify the power of Gandanta and how these people have had difficulties in their life and how they succumb to a drowning, a literal drowning. So the next two charts I want to display are Natalie Wood, which we did an extensive YouTube on her as well, and Dennis Wilson, one of the singers from the Beach Boys, popular, majorly popular band in the 60s out of California. So Dennis Wilson was born December 4th, 1944 at 10:56 p.m. in Inglewood, California. And going back over Natalie Wood's chart again, she was born July 20th, 1938, 11:16 a.m. in San Francisco, California. Both of them drowned in the Pacific Ocean, okay? So looking at both of those charts, what I see that comes up quite often is going to be a Gandanta planet. And not only that, or the ascendant, but not only that, notice it's usually in the sign of Cancer. You'll find that people that have planets at 29 degrees of Cancer, 28, 29 degrees, will have almost drownings, where they, as a kid, they almost drowned or something happens. But another thing I want to mention with Gandanta, it literally means drowning, but it can figuratively mean out of control, where you just can't grasp onto things. This is Gandanta. So it's not always literally happens, but it does many times, as did in these two cases. And I must say, in their life, they were out of control. Both of them had major, major issues. Natalie Wood was a beautiful, magnificently beautiful movie star, but she had her issues in many ways that stem from childhood. So looking at Dennis Wilson's chart, notice his ascendant is 28, almost 28 degrees, 54 minutes. That's his ascendant in Cancer. And the moon is there at 23 degrees of Cancer, the same exact degree as the sun in Whitney Houston's chart. So this area of the zodiac seems to be very powerful and destructive around water. And it is in the nakshatra Aslesha. So going to Natalie Wood's chart, she has Mercury at 29 degrees of Cancer. Very, very interesting when you think in terms of these degree markings in all four of these charts, that they're in Cancer, dealing with water, dealing with drowning, dealing with problems. Now in Natalie Wood, she has Rahu in Scorpio. And going to Dennis Wilson, he has the Mars Sun in Scorpio. So you're going to see this predominance of water signs in these charts, and many, many similarities. But in Dennis Wilson, just watch that Saturn Rahu in the 12th house can mean secrets, loss, and major problems. And with his Saturn also being in the nakshatra Ardra, there's sadness there in the 12th house and a teardrop. And it does deal with this. Ardra is ruled by Rudra, which is the storm god, which can cause tragedies. And this is actually what's come to pass in his life and in his chart. I also notice in Dennis Wilson's chart that he has Jupiter conjunct Neptune. And Neptune is, of course, the planet of the oceans and can deal many times with drowning, as well as Natalie Wood does have Neptune in her 12th house, which can be major problems, secrets, and drowning. So Natalie Wood also, it's a wide orb, but Neptune is aspecting Jupiter by opposition, where Dennis has Neptune conjunct Jupiter. So the main variable, the reason why I wanted to really do this video was because I wanted to show people these similarities in these charts and what to look for in terms of events. And the fact that Whitney Houston was, she was born 4 days earlier than Sridevi, and the charts are almost identical. And look at the results of the life, almost identical. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like more information on me, or you would like a reading, you can always go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org. Or if you would like to learn Vedic astrology, you can go to my university, which is University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.